Recording in progress. I will do that as well. Thank you for being here again. This is, I think, by now it may be like the session number 11. Last night I was checking about like the Zoom setups, and then I realized that all the sessions finished and I needed to create more. So it was like, wow, so fast. And thank you for everyone for their interest, for their support, for the translators, for the crazy speeding, and all the people recording and participating. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning.
I see Lena, Catherine, Janet, Milan. Thank you for coming. So, how are you feeling, Adam?
I got stung in the lip, on the inside of my lip by a bee.
I hear about it.
I
Crazy. How did it happen?
was eating a sandwich at the park.
Oh,
I don't know if you can tell, but it's crazy.
okay. Let me know how you're feeling. You think you're good for speaking?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah. I think I'll be able to do it.
Okay.
We'll
Okay.
see. It feels a little weird, you know.
Hmm. So my plan, what I wanted to do is to this time do just a quick review on some of the debates and how we can use the information we used last week about the 5 hips, 12 ayatanas, 18 datus. I think finally I got those correctly, at least the names. But that's already great progress. And how can we use that in our exploration of the debates? And then Adam is directing towards the Mushimusum. This is like a very good game that trains our minds to find similarities and differences, relationships. So before we start, just real quick, let's take a moment to set our minds and hearts into a good space of motivation. I'm still like very sleepy. And then I ask myself, why am I doing this? Waking up this early is one of the things that it's most difficult for me. But then it's like, okay, may it be for a very good purpose, helping me and hopefully the others to get clarity and use that clarity to fix the crazy things that have to be fixed in my existence. Okay. Okay. All right. So let's do it. Um, I'm going to share with you the debates and the PPT. Prepare for it. Okay. All right. Okay, we are in the section. This is still is some of the beginning parts of the book, the first book that Geshe Michael and Adam translated the very first book. And here we are just in the very first few pages still. We are entering the book. Let's say there's like 50 pages on some introductions, which already contain a lot of information, very valuable information. And then it started with the debates. This is debate number 8 in the section number 5, but it's like maybe it's like the first, it's inside the first few pages of it. And we already briefly went through it last session. So for many of you, um, this part of the book is gonna be already familiar. But last time when we went through the debates, Adam mentioned something I think valuable about how you could approach the debates. And I think so far I could say there are for sure many ways, but let's say two for purposes of this explanation, two ways of approaching the debate. One is going to be very quickly and through them, and this is going to teach us the debate format. And then if you take your time and dig deeply in each of one of them, you're going to also learn content and tools that each one of them shares with us. So what I thought is like we can get benefit from both of these ways. And I thought, why don't we do it that way? Let's first just go through debate 8 quickly, and then we will go back and dig in each part of the debate, kind of checking what's really going on. Okay. So, kachik nare. By now you know the kachik, it means one mouth, but it's just a way to say somebody. Somebody comes and says, okay, suk yina kadokimpe kyap serna. If something is formed, it must necessarily be a color. Okay, let's consider the smell of sandalwood. Are you saying it is a color? Why do you say that? Because it is a form. And it says, okay, like now notice this. As soon as we have the opening of the debate, in the book we have a footnote. And this footnote is going to come very relevant for the next few pages. And basically it just says, you can read if you want, but basically it says that you could be using the word form and referring to 3 different things. So this is very, very important. Like we are talking about a situation when some people could think they are talking about the same thing because they are using the same word, but actually they are talking about different things. It's almost like the opposite of what a synonym will be, maybe in a way, because synonym is they refer to the same thing using different words. But here we are using the same words but referring to different things. One, if we are talking about the 5 hips, it means the whole group of things that are physical. Either they are like sound, or like they are smells or taste, or whatever is physical. It's part of the form category, but only if we are talking in the context of the 5 hips, because then later we move on, and if we will be talking about in the context of the 12 doors of sense or the 12 ayatanas, we will be only talking about the things that you can see. That's colors and shapes, and that's what they mean when they say form in the context of the 12 ayatanas. Now, in the context of the 18 categories, it's very similar. Again, it refers to the object of the sense power of the eye, so things that we can see. And they add and the awareness based upon it, because in the ayatana, in the datus, in the 18 datus, it's like the object, the sense power, plus the consciousness that it triggers, the relationship between these two. So pretty much that's it, but it's very relevant because you will see in the upcoming debates, sometimes the debater is talking about form in the context of the 5 hips. Sometimes the debater is talking about form in the context of the 12 or 18 ayatanas or datus. But if we don't know this, like it can pass and how say over our heads without us noticing. If sometimes there is this saying, like, if we don't pay much attention, everything seems good. But if you start stopping and checking each one of them, you will see like there is an apparent contradiction, but it is not. The reason why is that the word form is being used in different contexts. Okay, so it says just because something is a form, doesn't mean it's a color. And our guy, the guy defending school number 2, says, okay, but you just agreed to that. That was how did you start this argument. You say that if something is a form, it has to be a color. Now you say it's not. And then the guy say, well, you know what? I disagree that the smell of sandalwood is a form. Okay, let's consider the smell of sandalwood. It is too a form. Why? Because it is something that you can point to as being a form. Then the opponent, the kachik, says, just because something is a thing you can point to as being a form doesn't mean it's a form. Yes, it does. Because something you can point to as being a form is in fact the definition of a form. Great, so we'll learn the definition of a form, but we'll be back in a moment. And then say, okay, never mind then. I was confused, but now I have it clear. Then I agree to the original statement. The smell of sandalwood is a color. Okay, check this out. If you agree to the original statement, consider again the smell of sandalwood. It's not a color. Why do you say it's not a color? Because it is a smell. Well, just because something is a smell, it doesn't mean that it cannot be a color. Actually, it says the defender of the school number 2 says, actually, it does mean that, because there is no one thing which it's both a smell and a color at the same time. And then this guy, the kachik, say, I disagree that there is nothing which is both a smell and a color at the same time. Okay, if you say that, let's consider again the smell of sandalwood. It is true that it cannot be a smell and a color at the same time. But why do you say that? Because being a smell and being a color are contradictory to one another. Okay, cool. Let me see. Yeah, that's the end of debate 8. But now I want to do a slight dig on it. And you tell me if there are certain aspects that start getting either clear or more confused, which is good because the questions very often lead us to new discoveries. But I want to share with you some things I have here. Okay, so the debate starts saying, if something is form, it must be necessarily a color. So now, Geshe Michael often says, what does a good debater does when they hear a statement in a debate? A good debater will immediately try to come up with counter examples. So I want to ask you, I have two questions for you audience here. Can you mention something that is form and is not a color? Let me see if I can see the chat. Just name an example of something that is form, but it's not a color. A pen, okay. Well, but what part of the pen? Just the pen, its form? Some people could argue that the pen is an idea or a mental picture. What means to be a color? We will go there later. That's a good question. Okay, smell. Sure, smell or particle. Okay, form. Yeah, okay. But now you may need to ask, because we already went through the debate quickly. Now you know that there is like, how to say, small letters warning. We read that when we talked about form, we could be talking about form in three different contexts. The context of the five hips, the 12 ayatanas, or the 18 datus. So it may be a good idea to ask, what do you mean by form? When you say form, what are you talking about? Are you talking about the five hips? Are you talking about the 12 ayatanas or the 18 datus? And this may seem sometimes very obvious, but it's a technique or element that is very used in the debates. It also can be, either you can do it to gain clarity, or you you can also do it to show off that you know the topic very well. Or you could also use it to try to confuse your opponent, because maybe they don't know that like the word form in this case can have these many uses. Geshe says that sometimes in the debate you ask for clarification, but really what you're trying to do is to pause a little bit the speed of the debate to get calm or clear about something. So you could do it for many reasons. The most important should be ultimately using debate to find truth, but it's also a game, at least the way I see it, so you can do a lot of things. So a good question here could be, okay, you're asking me to give you an example of something that is form, but it is not a color. So before I can do that, tell me, what do you mean when you say form? And now that we went through the debate, I would like, and you know that the example that they give is smell. The counter example for something that is form and is not a color, in this case, is smell. So do you feel, any of you feel like wanting to guess in what context, in one of these three contexts, are we using the word form here? Is it the five hips, or is the 12 ayatanas, or the 18 datus? Yes, I see in the chat is the five hips, and that's, yes, I agree as well. It's in the five hip context, because if we are talking about the 12 or the 18, they will not use the word form to refer to smell. So if they are calling a smell form, then it must be the 5 hips context. That was my logical brilliant, right? No, it's kind of very simple, but at the same time it can be confusing, or it can be not so accessible if we don't take the time to check it out. But the conclusion that I came through is in this segment is like, okay, they must be talking about the context of the 5 hips. Okay, now another thing important to check is that, look, in the Tibetan, it just says suk yimpe echer, because it is form. Oops, sorry. Let me see if I can go back. Yes, here. But, and I would like to ask the translator here, Adam. I think it was very interesting that Geshe and Adam decided to call it a form, not form, but a form. And that's also in the English language giving us some clues. One single letter, one single word in a debate or in Pramana could be giving us important information. Why did they decide to call it a form and not form? My guess is that if you call it a form, it's also kind of implying that it's a context of the 5 hips, because it means that there are many forms, not only form as it could be in the 12 or the 18. What do you think, Adam?
You know, I think it would. I think that's probably a great view.
Maybe. It's
Yeah.
maybe.
Um,
Okay.
you know, also if you say because it is form, that's more so referring to the category, right?
Mhm,
So it could be, but if you say a form, this is more specific, and you would be pointing to a form, right? Like we were saying suksharungwa earlier, because it's suitable to point to and call it form, right?
mhm,
But if you just say something is form, you're saying it has the quality of being form,
mhm,
and
mhm, mhm.
that's qualities are would be cheese, right? And not
Cheese?
yeah, and not necessarily rongsen. So
Oh, okay,
it would
okay.
be, yeah,
I
cheese.
thought you were like cheese.
Yeah, yeah,
What
yeah,
is it gonna say?
yeah,
Oh yeah, okay,
yeah.
cheese. Yes.
So I think, that's kind of the distinction. If I'm sure there's probably many people in the attending today that have done course 13, and you learn that there's very specific language that you can use uh, in between a, right? Like a form,
Mhm.
versus quote form. So this could be referring to quote form, but Geshe Michael doesn't like to use quotation marks, right? Um, so I had to kind of follow that when I was translating.
Yeah, and what I find out interesting is that a little later in the next debate, it changes, and you will see that it says it's given as a reason because it's form,
Hmm.
but you will see that the context change.
Yeah,
So my suspicion is that it may be indicating um, the context, but it's I think it's part of us as students and debaters to
hmm,
figure it out why sometimes he decided to
yeah,
choose a form, sometimes form, but
yeah,
to pay attention to these details could give us valuable information.
mhm, yeah.
Cool. So then, okay. So now we established, okay, where are we at? Okay, it's the context of the 5 hips. Great. And can we name an example that's something that it's form, but it's not necessarily a color? And yes, the example here is gonna be smell. We know that. But just so you know, if we were talking about the other context, the 12 or the 18, I thought, well, maybe that also applies, and we could say, what about shapes? Because shapes are formed in the context of the 5 hips, and they are not a color. So even though we could find an example. So just so our mind has options to counter act this statement, okay? All right. And then it's like why Geshe decided to here at this footnote. And now it becomes very evident for me that he's preparing us for the upcoming debates. He's how to say warning us or letting us know that okay, guys, you may get confused here, but remember that the word form could come in three different contexts. We already checked that out. Okay, and then the person says, okay, just because something is a form, it doesn't mean it's a color. Um, okay. I agree to original smell. The smell of sandalwood is a color. If you agree, okay, the smell of sandalwood is not a color because it's a smell. There is no one thing which is both a smell and color at the same time, is what our number two defender is claiming. But does this statement rings any bells for you guys? Have we have this kind of statement before or a similar one? To say that there is no a thing which is both a smell and a color at the same time. Remember, one of the most famous and debates that we have explored is the one that red and white.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, entirely. When Christian say entirely, when we were talking in the context of colors,
Mm-hmm.
that we were saying, yeah, there is nothing that can be red and white, and then of course, like entirely for the same person at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it'd be an interesting question to see, is there something which could be partly a color and partly a smell?
Yeah, right. It gets more complex here, but then I feel like it may it be a limitation of our mind to think that is not possible, because if in the past, although on school number two the official answer is like it's impossible for something to be entirely white and entirely red at the same time, then we know that in Madhyamika Prasangika we can add, in the fourth school we can add a few elements to make it possible as an idea, as a concept, to say, okay, but what about for different people? For different people, something could be totally white and totally red at the same time. And then just to open our minds, when we start exploring this idea that what about for an omniscient being? If an omniscient being could see how I see it as white and how Adam see it as red at the same time, but this omniscient being has the ability to see both of the points of view at the same time. So maybe for this person, it can be red and can be white at the same time for the same person. Maybe if this person has this kind of super powerful mind. And then I thought like, wow, but will this be the same? Will it be the case that an omniscient being could see a smell as a color at the same time? That really, I don't know, because I don't even understand. That seems to me more contradictory than two colors. But what I can say is like, I don't know yet. Like, is it such thing that you could? There, I got a little lost, but it's good because it's opening my mind to new ideas. Could something be a smell and a color? It really to me seems contradictory, because what a smell, like the smell of incense, would be perceived as red for somebody. Just to say an example, maybe I will have to think about it if it's possible, how it will be, and maybe that leads somewhere. But okay, we keep going unless somebody wants to has an idea about it. Okay, then it says, um, I disagree that there is no thing that it's both a smell and color at the same time. Okay, consider it. It cannot be that way because to be a color, it's contradictory to be a smell. Okay, and the reason there here I add a small, how you call this? I'm just laughing because I forget my English, like a small, I don't know, map or
Mm. Oh, a table.
yeah, a little table of the how form is divided in the context of the five heaps. This is
Mhm.
something that I got from ChatGPT, but remember, many times like ChatGPT may you will have to inspect very carefully. But
Mhm.
anyway, Suk and Rupa in Sanskrit, Suk in Tibetan, it's what it takes the whole group of physical things that you can perceive with your sense organs, like whatever you can see, hear, taste, touch, and that's when
Uh,
this table, as I mean, it's what helped me to find out what context we were talking about. Okay, so it helped me to gain clarity on this debate where we're standing, right?
mhm.
This is the same division, but from the book
Mhm.
segment we used last time.
Mhm.
And here's like the divisions on the 12 ayatanas
Mhm.
and the divisions on the 18 datus. And it's relevant because what is next. And I'll try to finish just in the next 5 minutes or a little like that to give Adam the time for taking us through Musum. Okay, so in this next debate, it's very similar. We're in the same realm of topics. It says, okay, if something is form, it must be the door of sense of visible form. And here, to me at least, I was already confused. Like the door of sense of visible form, I was not very clear of what's that of the door of sense. But then what I did is like, okay, I'm gonna take it to like I'm going to deconstruct the debate, and I'm sure with information ahead, we'll be able to understand what's the door of sense of visible form. Not only the door of sense of visible form, but the door of what's to be a door of sense itself. So let's consider sound. I guess is the door of sense of visible form. Why do you say that? Because it is form. And you see here now it doesn't say it's a form. Now it says it is form. So
Mhm.
let me see. Yeah. When it says that it's form, then I thought like, okay, maybe here we if it's form, if sound it's form, again we should be talking about the five hips because otherwise this wouldn't be it wouldn't be correct to say that sound is form if we were not talking about the five hips. Just because something is form, it doesn't mean that it is the door of sense of visible form. Although you are, that's how you started the debate. If something is form, it has to be the door of sense of visible form. Okay, never mind. I disagree that sound is form. Okay, I'm gonna tell you. Sound, it is form. Why do you say that? Because it is matter. Now it's like a different way to prove a very similar point.
Mhm.
Sound is form because
Mhm.
it is matter.
You know what? Can we pause
Mhm.
for a second? This could be a good place to maybe try to use Mushi Musum
Okay, okay.
together, right?
Mhm.
Um, so, uh, what if we say that form is matter, right? Um, what are we implying? Are
Mm,
okay, I'll ask again. Would we say that they are musum, that they share three things, right? Would we say that they're mushi in the sense that they're four, meaning that there are okay, with musum, we would be saying that there are some things which are form, and some things which are matter, but not form, right? Um, with mushi, meaning that they share four relationships, we'd be saying that there are some things which are form but not matter, and there are some things which are matter but not form. If we say that they are mutually inclusive, we are saying that everything which is form is matter, and everything which is matter is form, right? It's another way of saying that they're synonymous, right? If we say that they are mutually exclusive, if we say that they're mutually exclusive, we're saying that there is nothing which is form that is matter, and there's nothing which is matter that it is form, right? So where would we put form and matter within those four different ways of looking at things?
okay.
Can anybody give me an example of something which is form but not matter? Andreas, with the quick answers. Um, what's the matter? What's the matter? Oha, nothing's the matter.
No,
I'm
you
sorry.
said
I'm sorry.
what is matter?
Yeah, it's a bad joke. It was a
Ah,
bad.
okay.
Everything's fine, Ola. Nothing's nothing's wrong. Uh yeah, so matter would just be physical things, right?
And look at that. If this helps, in the next few paragraphs, it talks about the definition
Hmm.
of matter.
Yeah. So you see here it says dul drupa, right? So bimpo is matter, right? Bimpo here, if you look in 62 and 63, you have the word bimpo. Bimpo is the Western Chinese for matter. So if you look down below, right, then you'll have to see so Tsinyi here, let's say in 63, Tsinyi means definition, right? So if you say Bimpoi Tsinyi means because this is the definition, right? Dul Drupa here is something made of tiny particles, tiny physical particles, right? So Um, would it be okay to say that matter is something that is made of, would it be okay to simply say that matter is physical? I ask,
I think so, yeah.
yeah. So, and I would say that physical things here, Ola, and the question right now is how do we use mushi musum to reach a deeper and more clear understanding of different categories of things, right? This is exactly what it's used for. So, we could compare cats and dogs, right, to see how they would compare, but it's more beneficial for our spiritual development if we analyze things like physical matter or physical things and let's say matter, right? So we're starting to understand how the categories of existence, um, where they meet. Is there any overlap, right? Is there one thing that is the other? Yeah. Is there, so is there anything in one group which is the other? Right? So can we give a specific example? And Oha, just quickly, physical things, I think we could define here as being anything you can see, hear, smell, taste, or touch. That would be physical. Okay. The reason we can say that comes from the Abhidharma, and they say Chat GPT, always with the left field question, the left field answers. Um, you know, if we define physicality or physical things as being anything that you can see, hear, smell, taste, or touch, right? Because can we call like the emotion of anger, can we call that physical? I mean, you see what I'm saying? You might see the effects, the physical effects of anger, but I don't think anger itself, right? Like you could see a red face or somebody who seems to be upset. Yeah. So you see what looks like the result of um, of anger, but you don't see the anger itself because the anger isn't some. Is anger something you can smell? Is anger something you can see? I don't think you can see it directly. You see its effects, right? Does that make sense? So what I'm trying to do here is show that even the second group, remember there are three groups of changing things, right? And within the first group of changing things, you would have all physical things, right? So all physical things would have to be things that you can see, hear, smell, taste, or touch. Because Juan showed you the 18 dhatus, right? And anyways, so can anybody, yeah, you see here, anything you can see, hear, smell, taste, or touch. So form, if we were to take this, would we say that form, suit, is something that you can experience with the ear consciousness? Uh-uh, right? Form, if we look at the 18 dhatus, form has to be something that is a something that triggers the eye consciousness. Okay, that's what form is, right? So when we were asking earlier whether or not um, matter, okay, is something that is what was it? Matter and form. You see what I'm saying? So you can't say that all physical matter, all things, and we have to go back to Ola's question. I want to make sure that we answer it. What's physical thing, right? So physical things, right? Um, Something that is made of tiny particles. Remember? That was the definition of what was it? Can we go back? I want you guys to see the definition here. Is this making sense or am I too all over the place? Can you guys give me a thumbs up if we're right on? Okay, cool. I saw at least Lena gave me thumbs up and Lynn. Okay. I want to make sure that I'm not jumping all over the place. Okay. So, and thank you, Juan. Can we find the definition of physical? Yeah, there we go. Okay. So remember we said the definition of matter, right? Is something made of tiny physical particles. So can we say here that matter and tiny physical particles are synonymous? If I say tiny physical particles, right? Anything that's made of tiny physical particles is synonymous with being matter because that's the definition of matter, right? So anything that is matter is made of tiny physical particles. And where it's helpful to understand maybe all of these teachings with greater context, the Abhidharmakosha defines a tiny physical particle as having 8 different properties. Okay. So a tiny physical particle from the Abhidharma standpoint contains remember, it contains the 4 elements, the 4 great elements. Do you guys remember this from the classes? Okay. So within the Abhidharma, they say that if you take the tiniest piece of matter, okay, that okay, I have to back up here a little bit. And Juan, are you okay that we kind of stopped and pumped the brakes here for a second? Is it okay? Um,
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah, for sure.
So if you I believe it's been a long time, but I think it was course 4 that has um the definition of the elements, right? Is that correct? Does everybody do you guys remember? Okay. So we learned that the definition of fire is that which is hot and burning, right? The definition of wind, right? The definition of water, yeah? And so what Abhidharma says is that all of these elements are contained in every single tiniest physical particle, okay? So if you take a desk and you looked at each one of its individual particles, it would contain uh, particulate matter is made up of tiny atoms. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, totally. That's kind of what I'm going into here, Andreas. I think a little bit. Maybe it's the same. I think. You tell me if I'm saying something different. Um, so every single tiniest particle has 8 different properties. Okay. And we won't go into it too deeply. Okay. But the reason why I'm trying to make a point about this is because each particle will have some 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 degree of the fire element. Every particle will have some degree of the wind element. Every particle will have some degree of the earth element, right? So the 4 great elements will be contained within every tiniest physical particle, right? So that would be the definition. Those things would be included within the definition of matter. Okay. So Juan, can we go back to see the 18 dhatus? I want you to see why it is that I'm making that distinction. Okay. Because if we say that something is a tiniest physical particle, it will have some elements of each one of these things. Okay. Um, it doesn't mean that that tiniest physical particle will trigger each one of the consciousnesses. Okay. But the form particle, okay, excuse me, the if we have an object of form, which one of the dhatus do you think it would which one of the dhatus do you think it would most likely trigger? If we have a coffee cup and you look at a coffee cup, okay, which one of those sense powers do you think it would trigger? The eye sense power, of course, right? Of course. Now, if you go to pick it up, which one of those sense powers would it trigger? Yeah, the body sense consciousness. Now, let's say you left a little bit of coffee in the bottom of the coffee cup, right? And then you went and dumped it out, but there was still a stain at the bottom. Okay. Then you smelled the coffee cup. Which one of those sense powers would it trigger? Right? Your nose, right? So what I'm trying to point out here is that physical objects and tiniest particles can contain, and they say that sound sometimes isn't contained, but I'm not confusing you guys, am I? We've had presentations of this in the mixed nuts and also in my book too, the first time we went through and translated it. Um, so I didn't want to bog us down, and I hope I didn't confuse you more. But we need to go back now that there's some context to now looking at whether or not form and matter are synonymous. Okay. Do you guys see why I took that little detour? Okay. So can we head back over to that section from debate 9?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So is it true? Now we're going to use mushi musum after this, okay? But now, given everything that we've talked about, can we say that form is synonymous with matter?
Mhm.
What's the answer?
I will say yes, but also I will add only in the context of the five heaps, because in the context of the 18 datus, well, no, it actually also applies. It also
Hmm.
applies, but it applies in a different relationship, because if we're talking in the 18 datus, to be form, it means to be matter, but to be matter
Matter
doesn't
doesn't
necessarily
mean to
means
be
to be
formed.
form.
That's exactly, thank you, Juan. It's exactly the answer. You phrased it exactly. You said yeah, that was perfect the way that you stated it. Because this is how, okay. Now, last week we talked a little bit about musum, right? Which means three possibilities. So you have, okay, Juan just said that there are some things which are, excuse me, all form is matter, but only some matter is form. Okay. So remember last week, I tried to open up by talking about musum with comparing apples and fruits. Okay. So all fruits, excuse me, all apples are fruits, but it's not the case that all fruits are apples. Okay. And that was an example of three possibilities. Musum. Okay. Now, can anyone go through and give me how would we run through this? Okay. How would we do this with section 61 here? Is it, sorry, Ola, am I, yeah, I'm trying to make sure that we hit the questions as well. Um, all right. So, okay. Okay, give me something which is both give me an example of something which is both, let's say, form and matter. We could put it in the chat or feel free to use your mic and chime in if you'd like. Give me an example of something which is form and matter. Could we say apple? We could say apple, right? Okay. Give me an example. Yeah, a pen or a cup, right? Coffee cup. Yeah. You could say here, you could say anything which is physical, right? Or anything that has a smell, even too. Um, okay. So anything, uh, um, okay. Now, can someone give me an example of Q? Excuse me. Can anybody give me an example of something which is matter but not form?
And and again, I will have to say, Adam, it will have to depend again in what context are we using, the five heaps or the
Mhm.
12 or the 18. Because what it's surprising for me is that this debate, it's saying that sound is form.
Hmm.
Right here, I
Hmm.
say I disagree
Yeah.
that sound is form, but
Hmm.
the guy is saying yes, sound is form because it is
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that means that under the context of the 18 datus that we just see,
Hmm.
that will be incorrect. We will not be able to say that sound is form. We will have
Hmm.
to say that, I don't know, sound is sound or something like that.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that here, that's
What?
what that's the clue that makes us um, understand or decide that we are in the context of the five heaps,
Mm.
because the defender is saying that sound is trying to prove that sound is matter. So the only way that sound could be matter in a correct statement is if we are talking in the context of the five heaps, right? I think. Otherwise, it will be not correct to say that
Yeah. Yeah.
that sound is form.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
Um, okay. Let's Juan, can you and you know what we need to do? I think it would be helpful, and I'm happy to try to do this in the Telegram and the WhatsApp group to keep a running list of questions or a
Mhm,
running list of things to examine,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
Um, because I feel like I've already slowed us down so much today um, that I feel like I want to push through and maybe reach some place where we're
mhm,
not still asking questions and we've gotten someplace that it's like, oh, okay, you know, um,
mhm,
and you know what? I think the reason I'm doing this one is because I don't know the answer,
mhm.
and
No, and I think that's
yeah,
why we are here,
yeah,
because there are many things. That's why when I stop to check the debates very, how to say, slowly, that's when I
mhm,
start realizing like, oh, a lot of implications
mhm,
here and a lot of questions arise.
yeah.
But to
No,
me, that's really good because it's opening for me
yeah.
the
Well,
landscape to
I think no,
get
it's
somewhere.
I think you make a good observation. And the reason isn't necessarily that, okay, I think as a group together, we could spend time and we could reach that answer. I think with what everyone here in the attending and everybody participating today, I'm pretty sure that we could spend some time and we could figure it out. At surface level, um, I, I, at surface level, whenever I've presented Mushi Musum and I've taught it before, we haven't used the context of the five heaps and the 12 ayatanas and the 18 dhatus. We've just simply looked at Mushi Musum as it would apply to different terms.
Mhm,
So I think it's an interesting observation, and I'm sure that I could figure it out, you could figure it out, or if we gave it a little thought. But I don't want to necessarily get bogged down in trying to figure that out right now, because I think it's a little bit more simple than that. I'm not saying that we need to disregard the footnotes. Um, I'm saying that they will give us greater insight um, if we can reach the conclusion first of what I'm asking in 61. Then when we reach a conclusion, we may be able to take the lens of the 5, 12, and 18 to look at it in a different way. Um, it does, so I'm sorry, everybody, if I'm leaving a cliffhanger here. But uh, do we have an example of something which is form and matter? Okay. Yeah, we had a cup, we had a pen, right? Is there an example of something which is matter, but not form?
sound.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's go back. Remember,
Yeah.
this is why. Yeah. Well, this is also why we went to the definition of matter. Remember, we had the definition of bimpo, right? So we should be able to very precisely say what matter is, right? We now have a very precise definition, okay, in order to look at how form and matter would compare. Okay. So remember, the definition of matter was something made of tiny physical particles. So can we go back to 61? Okay. So is there something which is made of tiny physical particles that is not form? Yeah. And Milan, we had some great examples come in, right? The smell of sandalwood, right? Sound, right? These are all great, great examples. So, do we have an example of something which is neither form nor matter? Can anybody give me an example, a specific example of something which is neither form nor matter? Well, yeah, yeah, we could say that. Yeah, we could say that. I think anger, joy, anything mental, right? Anything which would be dim and duce, or anything which is unchanging, right? Could you say that a non-existent thing?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. It's interesting. We'll talk about it maybe in a few minutes. Uh, okay, so is there something? Okay, now can we all see how this would be an example of something which is three, which would be musum, right? Because remember, we have apples and fruits, right? Uh, some fruits are apples, right? But not all fruits are apples. Yeah. You can also point to something which is neither, which is like a goat, or that flying Mexican agave bat that Juan always Juan always laughs at. um, yeah. So that would be another example, right, of musum. Um, and anyways, sorry, I thought that was a good example to maybe start on. And I thought it was a good place to stop because uh, when Juan was going to share the rest of the time with me, we were going to start off by looking at Musum, and this was a textual example of that. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so thank you, Juan, for pumping the brakes and slowing down with me.
No, for sure, for sure. And I agree. Actually, it's good what you say, and that's why this idea of first going through the debate and then coming back and pausing, because then we know where the author is taking us.
Yeah,
We won't get so
yeah,
lost.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think you want me, Adam, to finish this debate, or
I
will
think
you like to use the
let's
last 15 minutes to some
yeah.
other topic?
In English, we say, let's put a bow on that present.
What does that mean?
It's like a wrapping like a Christmas present, and then
Uh-huh.
you have to put a bow on it to like finish it off. Like it's like the last thing. So
Okay.
it's like we have the present wrapped, but
Okay.
now we have to finish it by putting the bow on.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah,
So we finish this debate?
yeah.
Right? Okay. 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 So we are in this exciting part where form is matter. And then we keep going and then say, okay, I disagree that sound is matter. Okay, I will show you that sound is matter. Why do you say that? Because it's made of tiny physical particles. Okay. And then the guy says, well, that doesn't mean anything. If something is made of tiny physical particles, it doesn't mean that it's matter. But the defender say, well, it actually does, because being made of tiny physical particles is the definition of matter. And then the guy goes, okay, okay, okay. Maybe I was confused, but now I'm clear. You're right. Sound is the door sense of visible form.
Mm.
And then this guy say, okay, check it out. Again, consider sound. Sound is not the door of sense of visible form. Why? Because it is not that object which is perceived by the consciousness of the eye.
Hmm.
So now here is like the definition is hidden. It's not
Hmm.
forward, how say, it's not directly say that, oh, this is the
Hmm.
definition of the door of sense of visible form, but it's telling you that in a way it's telling you the door of visible form is that object which is perceived by the consciousness of the eye. And because sound is not that, then sound is not the door of sense of visible form. Do, do you see how's this game like?
Mm-hmm.
And then, okay, I disagree that sound is not that object which is perceived by the consciousness of the eye. So this
Mm-hmm.
guy is saying, no, yes, sound is what which is perceived by the consciousness of the eye. Then the defender is like, okay, I'm gonna show you why it's not. And it is not because sound is the object which is heard by the consciousness of the ear.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, okay, cool. So here I make a small pause to say, okay, because my original question was, what is the meaning of the door of sense?
Uh,
So what I did is like this exercise. Okay, if the definition of the door of sense of physical form is that object which is perceived by the consciousness of the eye, which we just had, then what is the object that matches that definition? And I use the 18 um, datus again, right? And I say, okay, the object which is perceived by the consciousness of the eye is form, right? Because it's like where, okay, the eye sense power, the eye consciousness, which is the object, okay, form. But remember, in the context of the 18, because I say, okay, sorry, in the context of the 5 hips, because otherwise we could not call sound form. So then it's like, I was thinking, if we use the 12 or the 18, the context, we may need to add visible to form, or
sorry,
even to change it for colors and shapes, no?
Juan, can you tell me why that is the case? Like, um,
Uh-huh.
just like if I was like 5 years old.
Yeah, okay. Because check this out. If the definition of the door of sense of physical form
Mm-hmm.
is the object which is perceived by the consciousness of the eye,
Mm-hmm.
that's excluding like sound or smell,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because it's only what is perceived by the eye.
Yeah. Okay.
So that means that when they say physical form,
Mm-hmm.
they are only talking about visible
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
and um, maybe it will be more appropriate instead of here. And I don't know, I'm just really
Yeah.
saying theories. Instead of having form as the object in the
Uh-huh.
context of the 18, what if we just change it for colors and shapes? That will
Mm.
make us not get lost so
Yeah.
much.
I think you've got a good point. Yeah.
Or at least add the word visible. Visible form is the object of the sense power of the eye.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In order for it to fit this definition, that it's
Yeah.
the object which is perceived by the consciousness of the eye.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, okay. And then, okay, we keep going. It's just a note, so we, or at least I did it for myself to don't get lost in, okay, what is, okay. Then these guys say, okay, fine, I agree with you. Sound is the door of sense of visible form. And he was like, okay, I'm going to show you why sound is not the door of sense of visible form. Why not? Because it's not that object which is perceived by the consciousness of the eye, right? Okay, this guy says, no, 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 no. I disagree that sound is not that object which is perceived by the consciousness of the eye.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why I'm gonna prove you it's not the case? Because it is the object which is heard by the consciousness of the ear. And then we talked about visible form or form in this table, but now we're gonna check the same about sound.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, but it's like now you have to approach it from the conclusion to the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, retroactively.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say sound is that object which is heard by the consciousness of the ear. The definition of the door of sense of hearable form is that object which is heard or perceived by the consciousness of the ear.
Mm-hmm.
So sound has to be that object which is heard by the consciousness of the ear. Therefore, sound must be the door of sense of hearable form.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I was I was lost at the beginning because what's the meaning of to be the door of sense of something, right? But
Hmm.
now I think I can come to the conclusion that the door of sense of any of the consciousness, or it's the object.
Hmm.
So the objects themselves, like in this case, form, sound, odor, taste, is they are also called doors of sense.
Hmm.
But I didn't have that clear, and I had to do all this exercise to understand what's the thing that it's refer when the text says the door of sense.
Hmm.
It means to the object that triggers that
That sense consciousness.
consciousness, right? Okay,
Mhm.
fine. And for me, this was like a big like great, like I finally got it. But I had to do all these like exercise of so now it's the same thing. The definition of the door of sense of physical form, then finally, is how we start the debate. It must be that object that is perceived or seen by the consciousness of the eye, which in this case, I would say is either colors or shapes or visible
Hmm.
form.
Yeah.
Great. And this, just to finish, it says, okay, the guy goes and says, I disagree that sounds is that object which is heard by the consciousness of the ear.
Hmm.
Okay. I'll prove why it is so because it's the door of sense of sound.
Yeah.
So sound, it is the object which is heard by the consciousness of the ear, and at the same time, sound is the door of sense of sound. Does that make sense? Sounds like redundant, but I guess you could also say sound is the door of sense of hearable things. But
Yeah.
to be a hearable thing is a synonym with to be sound.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it passed the test.
Yeah.
And I think this is a great example to see why it's so important to know the topic of synonyms.
And
Because
definitions.
here we had an example of how there are so many ways to talk about the
Mhm.
same thing. We were talking about sound,
Yeah.
but we can talk about sound as the door of sense of hearable things. We can talk about sound about that thing that
Hmm.
triggers the consciousness of the ear,
Hmm.
and many different ways that are talking about the same object.
Yeah.
But if we don't know these, it's super easy to get lost in a debate.
So has everybody heard the Gok Shak Pong Sum? Just the three different sections of a debate text, right? Um, the second one refers to Wrong Luke, the Wrong Luke section. Okay. And Wrong Luke is where we're going to give our definition, our divisions, right? And we're also going to give a list of synonyms. So coming up in the next section, the Wrong Luke section, you're going to get all those definitions, right? And the reason those are helpful is was demonstrated in today's class. So I put the Wrong Luke section, I believe, in the chat a couple of weeks ago. And I was asking everyone to take a look at it so that you could be exposed to the definitions and the divisions and the synonyms and the classical examples of this chapter. Okay. And I hope everyone can see how, if you memorize those things, how clearly you will understand, right? Physical reality. There won't be anything that you can experience with your consciousnesses that you cannot describe, okay? Which is powerful to be able to do, right? So I'll ask one last question. If I was to give an example of something that I say is musum, okay? Let's go through it together because this is a special case, okay? If I say that things that are empty, okay? Let's say we're going to compare things which are empty, okay, and um, all existing things, okay. So we're going to compare things that are empty with all existing things. Can somebody give me an example of something which is something that is empty and also something that is an existing thing? A pen. Ha, Andreas hit me. Yeah, he beat me to it. Okay. Can somebody give me an example of something that is an existing thing, but not something that is empty? Uh-uh. Uh-uh. Right? Nuh-uh. There's nothing. Ain't nothing. Well, what about nothing? Is nothing something that we could point to? But no, you can't, actually. You can't. Okay. And that's the reason I brought this up. You cannot posit, well, you would have to define what you mean by nothing. Do you mean empty space? Right? Because somebody say there's nothing in my driveway because my car isn't there. Right? Is that a space you could point to? Yes, maybe. Right? But when I say nothing, I was thinking something which is non-existent. Okay. And this is a very important rule of Mushi Musum, which is when you are comparing two things, okay, you cannot compare something that is non-existent. You cannot use something that is non-existent to compare to apples, for instance, because non-existent things have no qualities. Okay. It is in classical logic, you would call it an empty set or a null set. There's nothing within that group of things that would share a common quality. Okay. Do non-existent things have the quality of being non-existent? Anyways, not trying to confuse anybody here. That's an interesting question in itself. But the reason I pointed this out is because we said a pen is something which is both uh, empty and also an existing thing, right? Then we said, is there something which is an existing thing but not empty? Everybody said, nuh-uh, no, there's nothing we can demonstrate, right? Then can somebody give me an example of something which is neither an existing thing or something which is empty? Nuh-uh. Well, non-existent thing. But that would also, we can't use that as an example, right? So, I mean, this is why I kind of gave the context before we went to the punchline, right? So, in this case, that's why I wanted to, but emptiness is empty itself. Yeah, totally. Is emptiness is emptiness an existing thing? Is emptiness an existing thing? What is emptiness empty of? The gotcha, right? Yeah, totally. Is the gotcha a non-existing thing? Yeah. Do you see how this gets fun? And do you see how you can actually have some pretty deep kind of ideas when you start using these tools? Okay. Now, the reason I pointed to existence or things that exist and things that are empty is because if we really think about it, and let's come back to it next week, or let's put it in the Telegram or WhatsApp as to something to maybe revisit next week, would be I'm suggesting that there is nothing that you can point to that is not an existing thing or something which is empty. I'm saying there's nothing which you can point to. Okay. Nothing you can think of. And if that is true, that means that this is one case. Okay. This is one case where it's not mushi or musum. This is one special case. Okay. Where it would be muni, right? Which means two possibilities. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? So, super special case, okay, is when you start talking about things that include all existence. All right. And if it doesn't make sense, uh, let's talk about it next week. Okay. Because I think that's class time, right? We're 5 minutes over. Yeah. Okay. Thanks everybody for coming. I hope it was fun again. Yeah. Really appreciate everybody. I got stung in the lip by a bee.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank you, Adam,
okay.
as well, and the translators. Now we have more translators. I think they are taking shorter turns.
Yeah.
The only way to survive.
Sorry. I knew I started speaking a little quickly today, and I had to slow down.
But I want to thank them, and I also want to say that that's very smart.
Yeah.
Divide and conquer, they say, no?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So cool. We can keep talking these conversations in the
Mhm.
chat, or if you have questions, put it there.
Yeah.
That helps us to come up with uh, material and content for next session. And yeah. Also, we hear opinions. If you think like it's whatever taking too long on only one debate, or you say no, we want to take even longer in one debate, things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Give us feedback.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, and yeah, we'll keep you posted. What else can we say? Yeah, best wishes for the upcoming weekend.
All right.
Okay, so see you
Thanks,
next
everyone.
time. Thank you,
All right.
translators, Lily,
Thank
people
you all.
recording, and all
Yeah.
of you for your time and interest.
Everybody enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.